If I didn't learn this, I would be pissed, so listen up. So at this rate, the Nintendo Switch 2 might literally go down in history as the most hated console to ever hit the market, which is crazy because the sales tell almost an entirely different story. But one thing that may or may not warrant the hate are these darn game keycards. So much so that it leads me to ask one question. Are physical game discs and cartridges almost a dead concept? What's up everybody, I'm Zeke and welcome to Zeke Digital. If you're into tech and Nintendo Switch content, subscribe to the channel and make sure you watch to the end because we're about to cook. So we've got news updates regarding the game keycards that Nintendo's rolling out. We've even got a complete list of confirmed titles that we know are going to be released as keycards, so stick around for that. But first, let's talk about what even is a game keycard. So for those who don't know, Nintendo has these versions of physical games that are technically physical cartridges that house a game key for a digital download. So that makes 3 different types of games total, with sole digital downloads, the physical game cartridges we've been familiar with ever since the original NES console, and these newer game keycard cartridges that allow you to kinda have a physical card, but you really just download the game to your system anyway. Technically 4 total, including the virtual game cards too, but that's worthy of another video. So game keycards don't store the entire game like the regular Switch 2 cartridges would. They act as a key to unlock a digital download of the game from the eShop, essentially, which also means you need to have access to the internet, at least for the initial download, to acquire the game. Not only that, you still need the physical card to be present and inserted to access the game, which poses a very interesting question. Who the f is this for? You'll ultimately still need to have freed up storage space and likely another $50 or so to buy a SD card, a $200 SD card mind you if you get the 1 terabyte express, opposed to just saving just your save data to the console like you would with an original game cartridge. And they're not tied to your Nintendo accounts, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. So before we get into the nitty gritty, I want to read from Nintendo themselves on how they describe it and also the process of loading your game keycard. Here it says, game keycards are different from regular game cards because they don't contain the full game data. Instead, the game keycard is your key to downloading the full game to your console via the internet. After it's downloaded, you can play the game by inserting the game keycard into your console and starting it up as normal. Seems legit. So let's scroll down to the part where it says how it works. So step 1, you insert your game keycard into the console. Of course. Step 2, you download the game. The game itself isn't included on the game keycard, so you'll have to download it before you can play. That sounds so strange even just to read. But when you insert the game keycard, further instructions will be displayed on the home menu. Please follow the instructions to download the game, and then we move into step 3, which is play the game. Everything else is pretty close to what we discussed already, but something I didn't quite make as clear was this line here. However, like regular physical software, the game keycard must be inserted into the console in order to play the game. You know that. If you insert a game keycard into another Nintendo Switch 2, the game can also be played on that console by following the above steps. But being that the game card must be present, obviously it will only work on that specific console at a time. And I also want to reiterate that the game card structure is not replacing the typical physical games, because I know somebody down in the comments is gonna have an aneurysm. There was a big uproar of people just assuming that these were gonna be replacing physical cards, and it's just not that. It's just not happening. There are some benefits for the publishers though. Nintendo says they allow publishers to sell physical copies of the games at retail, especially those that exceed the 64 gigabyte capacity of a regular cartridge. According to Nintendo, you are also allowed to sell and trade these game keycards per usual, so it's not that different, but I honestly would feel a little blueballed if I bought one of these unbeknownst. Collectors are possibly the only true audience for these in my opinion, but even that's a bit of a stretch. The packing may look the same, but it just feels a little bit like a shell of a collectible if I'm honest, at least in my opinion. Luckily, it appears that there will still be entire games that are physically housed on the game cartridges. Mostly native Nintendo titles and whatever games that can fit under 64 gigabytes. Those 64 gigabyte cards also cost more for publishers, but you'll see why that's important in just a second. Now, I know everyone's up in arms about this, along with everything else surrounding the Switch 2, but surprisingly enough, there was also a similar concept that wasn't highly promoted, featured in some of the Switch 1 games. If you bought any compilation games or collections, say like the Mega Man X Legacy Collection Part 1 or 2 type of games, those often feature 1 to 2 games housed on the cartridge and the others are typically downloaded. So then what is the big deal? And more importantly, how can you even tell if your game is a game keycard version? If I didn't learn this, I would be pissed, so listen up. Well, at the bottom of the case, Nintendo does specify, so you can rest assured as long as you see this little call out, game keycard. Although it's an extremely small print, it also says how many gigabytes of free space you're gonna need and the words full game download via internet required. So as long as your parents don't surprise you with a new game for Christmas or your birthday, you should at least be able to spot it. It's also important to remind you that this is totally up to the choice of the publisher side, so not all games will come in all 3 versions, at least not yet. But honestly, I'm not quite sure if that's something that we should look forward to. And I am by no means a Nintendo hater. Speaking of which, you watching this probably fall into one of these 2 camps. The side that's thinking, well, this isn't much of an issue at all. Or you're pretty peeved that this is even a thing since storage space is already the hardest hurdle to jump, even though the Switch 2 has an increased internal storage of 256 gigabytes. If that sounds like a small amount, well, the most amount of games I had already installed on my Switch 1 at once was like 2 games and a couple mini games. So I'm gonna be gracious this time, I promise. Now let's talk about all the confirmed game key card titles for the Switch 2. So we've got Bravely Default Flying Fairy HD Remastered, which is one of the release titles. A lot of these actually are. Then we also have Madden NFL's 2026 coming out on August 14th. Hitman World of Assassination Signature Edition launch title as well. No Sleep for Konami Date, or Date, I'm not sure how you pronounce that one, but another title on that list is Puyo Puyo Tetris 2S. That's a launch title as well, made by Sega. We got Raido Remastered, The Mystery of the Soulless Army, which is coming out on June 19th. Sonic and Shadow Generations, another launch title by Sega. Star Wars Outlaws, coming out on the 4th of September. And then we got Street Fighter 6, Years 1 and 2, Fighters Edition. Oh wait, and I can't forget Yakuza 0 Director's Cut, which is also another launch title. Those are the titles that we have already got confirmation are gonna be game key cards. Elden Ring Tarnished Edition also falls into this list according to some sources online, but I'm not jumping out the window saying that this is concrete just yet. But I'm not gonna lie, man, that Street Fighter 6 one kinda hurt a little bit. Wait a minute, there's no way that Puyo Puyo Tetris and Bravely Default are more than 64 gigabytes. So now I'm confused. They must have just opted for the game key card to save money. That and the fact that Cyberpunk 2077 is on a physical game card entirely. Now we're just losing perspective on why. In certain ways, it's better than the typical shop download, but far less functional and future-proof than a typical game cartridge. And at that price, I don't know the price exactly yet, but if it's anywhere near the other physical card prices, that's just outrageous. If they were gonna push towards this direction, maybe they should just sell all digital. Not that I would prefer that, but honestly, it's heading that way soon anyways. But here is the real kicker and the biggest concern that I've had for a couple of years now, and is physical media on the verge of really, and I mean really, going extinct? We've already become increasingly more numb to spending more money on less tangible things. We've seen it happen recently with CDs, records, movies, DVDs, and of course game discs and cartridges already, with e-stores and e-shops and streaming. Almost everything we spend money on nowadays is only digitally stored and somewhat owned. It's actually closer to a lease of the data more than anything. I don't know about you, but I like to own things, tangible things. I'm not afraid to adapt to the times. I just like what I like, I guess. How do you guys feel about it? Thanks a ton for watching. If you made it this far, then you ought to subscribe and rock with this. I'm genuinely interested in what you guys think about the state of all this, with Nintendo holding on to like the last thread of physical media in the form of what I consider is almost a useless game key card. If we're gonna download it anyway, just let me do a digital download and get on with my life. Unless, now here's something I could possibly get behind. If there was a special edition game release box with a set or something that comes with other products that you can only get with it, because at least then we can get something of unique value. But now I just feel like I'm copping bail. If you want to check out more coverage for Nintendo Switch 2, I also have these videos to check out as well. Catch you guys on the next one. Peace.